Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I am running a little late this morning because every once in a while when I go to set up the live video, when I get done typing in the caption and I go back to it, my face is like way up here and I'm like, oh no. And I haven't figured out how to fix that yet. It's a kind of a new thing, but I'm pretty sure nobody wants to see me that close and I don't want to see me that close either. That's why I don't use magnified mirrors if I can avoid it. In any case, if you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, you can still drop comments, questions, hashtag replay, whatever. The cool thing about live videos is even though that Facebook only keeps them for 30 days now, it's still here for 30 days for you to look at if you didn't catch it live. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend. I am a grad student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling and part-time program director for NAMI Citrus. And I'm a huge wellness advocate. And the reason that I am a huge wellness advocate is because I have been in a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression. And I have learned so much. And a lot of what I've learned has been from sharing what I've learned with others and them sharing it with me. So Facebook is a great forum to do that, or social media in general, because we can share ideas. And contrary to popular opinion, we can share ideas without arguing with each other, right? We can share what worked for us. We can cheerlead for each other. We can use our powers for good. So if you're just stumbling on my page, that's what it's all about. I started Wellness Wednesday to share what works for me and to invite you to share what has worked for you as well. Because sometimes we can learn from each other. And then if you have been following me on a regular basis, last week's video was called I Should Be Further By Now. And it was about this invisible timeline that we impose on ourselves or that we allow others to impose on us that says we have to hit certain benchmarks or milestones by certain ages. And I guess that works fine in childhood development. To kind of help make sure that we can spot if there's a problem or something that needs a little bit of intervention. But as adults, a lot of the things that we have timelines for just don't work for everybody. And a lot of those timelines just don't work anymore, period, in our current culture because things change. So it was a perfect lead in to what I'm going to talk about today, which is unlearning. And I'm still debating on whether or not I want this to become, good morning, Miss Kayla, whether or not I want this to become more of a little mini series. And you'll have to let me know your thoughts on that if there's a specific item here that I mentioned that you want me to expand on. So I've been thinking about unlearning a lot for a while. And I think the beginning of the year is a great time to look at what unlearning is and what we can strive to do under that umbrella in the next year if you subscribe to goals, resolutions, etc. The definition, the dictionary, Merriam-Webster online definition of unlearning is to discard something that's been learned. It also often refers to such as bad habits, outdated information, distorted beliefs. And what does it have to do with wellness? Well, it has to do everything to do with wellness. Wellness is a big umbrella. A lot of things fall under it. And when we operate under information and beliefs that just don't apply anymore, it dramatically affects how we function, our wellness, and how we react and respond to other things and other people. Currently, it is most often used in terms of bias and discrimination. Especially like in my classes, my grad school classes, there's a lot of information there about implicit bias, and systemic discrimination. And I'm not even going to go there, but, unlearning, even though that's how it's currently used, unlearning has some very, very broad implications. And I was sharply reminded of that yesterday, which I'll get into in a few minutes. So, a lot of what we talk about with Wellness Wednesday has to do with unlearning. And when I started researching unlearning, just plugged in the word and was like, okay, what have we got? I found tons of lists, and most of them overlapped in some way, shape, or form. So here are basically the top 10 that spoke to me the most as either something I've talked about, something I've already unlearned, something that we've talked about here on Wellness Wednesday that I hear a lot from others, or something that I'm currently working on. So let me run down this list real quick and see if any of these hit a nerve. Perfectionism. People who love me will hurt me or leave me. External validation. Self-talk. Timelines, which we talked about last week. Alone versus lonely, or alone equals lonely. Success looks like financial wealth or titles or status symbols. Fear of success or scarcity. And we don't have any control over anything that happens to us. It's all predetermined. So those were the most salient things to me that I know have impacted me personally, that we've talked about here on Wellness Wednesday. So just to dig into each of those just a tiny bit further. Perfectionism. What does that mean? It means it has to be right, or I shouldn't bother. I can remember I so badly wanted to relearn how to sew. I took home economics in middle school and got my grandmother's sewing machine, and I was going to sew. I was like a size 0 at the time, and it was really hard to find affordable clothes in my size. So I was like, I'm going to make all my clothes. It's easy. I can do it. I learned which part of the list, or was it the whole list, Kayla? But I never could get started. And the reason I could never get started was I couldn't get past that final picture. And if it didn't look like that final picture as soon as I started, I just stopped. I was just frozen. I couldn't do it. So it had to be perfect and it had to be right, and this I have found applied to so much of my life. If it wasn't perfect, I wasn't going to bother. I was just going to stop, and I was going to do something else or change my mind. What else does this look like? This looks like fear of failure. Because if it didn't look perfect, then that meant I failed. And I was afraid of failing, so I would just stop. If I think I might fail, I shouldn't even try. And that also equates to comfort zones. We stay in our comfort zones because that's where we're comfortable. Trying anything new, trying anything different, doing anything outside of that comfort zone is scary. We might fail, so we shouldn't bother. Because we don't like the way we feel when we try it. We don't like what the implications are. We don't like what the risks are. So that's basically what perfectionism boils down to. And if perfectionism means something different for you, drop it in the comments by all means. People who love me will hurt me or leave me. I can remember my father leaving when I was 3. And apparently that had a more profound effect on me than anybody realized it was ever going to have. Also, when I was growing up, I was bullied a lot. And a mistake, not just that my parents made, but a lot of parents made. And I've had to stop myself from doing it because I hear myself parroting it, but I know better, so I stop, is, oh, if they're picking on you, it's because they like you. And that is that one sentence probably caused me the most heartache in my relationships going forward, because what that leads to, unfortunately, is that we believe that when somebody mistreats us, that it's because they like us or because they love us. And that is how we end up in, a lot of times, how we end up in abusive situations or really bad situations. So that is a very, very common thing, and it comes from very specific places. We've been hurt by somebody, especially early on, absent parents, bullying, and at some point we've been led to believe that people who say they love us, this is how they show it, until we start to learn that actions and words should match and that actions should trump those words. And then external validation, we all know what that is. That's when we worry more about what other people think, other people believe about us than how we feel and what we believe about ourselves. Self-talk, this is one of my favorite soapboxes to get onto, and I still catch myself doing it all the time. Not as often maybe as I used to, but more than I should. And that is what goes on inside our head doesn't matter. What we say doesn't have any impact because we've been taught at some point to repress our emotions. And what that turns into is it turns into a negative thought loop that echoes some of these other things I've talked about. And then the stories we tell ourselves become what we believe. Timelines, too early, too late. Talked about this last week. We think that everything has to happen on a specific timeline, usually handed to us by culture, familial experience, sometimes religion, organized religion. I'll be more specific. And so, and what we're talking about here when it comes to timelines is things like I have to have a baby by the time I'm this age, and I have to be married by the time I'm that age, and I have to have my own house by the time I'm this age, and then our self-worth is tied to whether or not we've accomplished those things. I have to graduate college by this age. I have to be, you know what I mean? So I'll drop the link to last week's video if you missed it so that you understand that context. Alone equals lonely. I spent a lot of time wallowing because I wasn't spending time with people, because I wasn't included in plans, or I didn't have plans and found out that other friends of mine were out doing something and I wasn't invited. And in my world for a very long time, being alone meant being lonely. It meant nobody loved me. It meant nobody wanted to hang out with me. It meant there was something wrong with me. Until I learned that I needed to learn how to be alone with myself. And that if I didn't want to be alone with me, why the heck would somebody else want to be alone with me? So a lot of times we equate the two when they really have nothing to do with each other. And now I have found that alone time is necessary for me. And it doesn't mean I'm lonely. It means that I have space to breathe and within which to just kind of be myself and shed everything else for a little bit. And that's become very important for me. The belief that success looks like financial wealth or titles or status symbols. Success can be tied to so much more. My daughter said something to me the other day. She did something that just totally surprised me. And it's one of those moments, and if you're a parent, you've probably had one or two of these. And if you haven't yet, it's coming, where you suddenly go, oh my gosh, my adult child is a really good person. They're just a really good person. And to me, that is success. To me, having an adult child who is self-sufficient and makes a positive impact on the people around her. Good morning, Miss Victoria. That is success. And it's got nothing to do with money or titles, any title other than mom. To me, that is success. And I don't claim all the responsibility for that. It takes a village to raise a child, but success it's different in so many ways. Right now, for me, success means doing what I'm called to do, which is to do this degree, become a counselor, and do these things. And to me, that's success, that I was brave enough to do that. And then, of course, fear of success or scarcity is when we question all the good things that happen to us and we wait for the other shoe to drop. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. And then, of course, that common belief that so many of us have, which is that we don't have any control over anything. Everything is predetermined. And for a very, very long time, I did not believe I had any control over my life. I believed that the situations I were in were what were being dealt to me. May have even thought at times that it was because I was a bad person and I was being punished. And none of those were true. It boiled down to how I was perceiving things and how I was reacting and responding to things. And when I started to change that, everything changed. Now, do I have control over everything? Absolutely not. Do I have control over a lot more than I ever thought I did? Absolutely, I do. So these, like I said, are the top 10 that spoke to me, but there are laundry lists everywhere on the internet of all the things that we should unlearn, okay? Or that we need to unlearn, or that people are learning to unlearn. So where did this come from, and why do we need to unlearn? Let's get to that for a minute. So a lot of times these come from these beliefs, these things that we've learned, they come from early experiences. We learn things from experience. If we have a bad experience, we have a tendency to just project the results of that experience or the thought processes associated with it onto everything that looks even a little bit like it. You know what I mean? Even if it quacks a little bit like a duck, but it might not be a duck, we're looking at it like it's a duck. So we, a lot of times that's where it comes from. It comes from early experiences, previous experiences. It comes from our parents, and it's not their fault. I'm not blaming our parents, because their thought processes and their beliefs and the things that they learned from the people before them, or from experiences, or from social circles, and then they passed it down to us. We learn things from school. We learn things from social circles. But sometimes that information becomes outdated, or it becomes inapplicable. We change, we evolve, and not all of the things that we've learned still apply. A very, very, very simple layman's terms example that I can give you is a stress fracture that I had back in 2005. My significant other at the time kept telling me that it was nothing. I needed to run through it. Well, that individual was also a lot bigger than me. Their bones were a lot denser than me. And their information was about 20 years old. And there was a lot, as I began to research, there was a lot of new information that said differently. Now, this person was able to run through stress fractures and do all kinds of sports and everything despite them, because they had very strong bone density, and because that was just how things like that were handled at the time. You either got off of your feet or you sucked it up. Shin splints too. Whereas new research indicated that that was not the way to handle it, especially for somebody my size with smaller bones. That if I had continued to run on that stress fracture, or what could have been at the time shin splints until I got the test I needed, could have caused a lot more damage, and possibly even resulted in me being laid up for a lot longer. So again, very layman's terms example, very much not about mindset, but the point there still remains that a lot of times our information is outdated, or it's just not applicable to our situation. So sometimes we have to update it. We have to discard it. We have to relearn, if you will, because it's just no longer, like I said, it's no longer applicable. So if we don't unlearn, we become rigid. We become unable to learn new things, or we simply refuse to learn new things. And we become stuck in beliefs that are no longer applicable, or that may not be applicable to that situation. And we become stagnant. And this, and a famous area where you often see this is in business or in nonprofit organizations. And Kayla, if you're still watching, you're going to know what I'm about to say, which is, this is the way we've always done it. This is used all the time in businesses and nonprofits. People are resistant to change, and this is the way we've always done it. And a perfect example of this is the fishing tournament that I used to run. And a few years ago, when I was training other people, the question was asked of me, why do we still do morning checkout? Why do we do it? I had been with that organization for 21 years. I had no idea why we did it. I had just been doing it because that was what was always done. But the moment that somebody was like, why do we do it? I went back through the history in my head, the history tabs, the Rolodex. Yeah, see, I knew you would know, Kayla. And I went, I have no idea. So we stopped doing it. So that's important, and I want you to hang on to that for just a minute. But that's what happens when we refuse, when we are not open to updating our information and our beliefs, then we become rigid and we become unable to learn new things. And sometimes that really slows down progress, especially in the case of businesses, nonprofits, like I just spoke about. In almost any situation, if we're not open to new ideas and we're not open to changing the way we think about things, then we are doomed to just keep repeating the same cycles. So how do we do this? How do we do this? Well, here's where I wanted an example of what this kind of looks like in action. And I'm hoping I can get through this without tearing up, because yesterday I had a very powerful moment with my daughter. She has had some unexpected blessings recently. And when I pointed out to her that, sorry guys, I'm going to try to stay intelligible here. When I pointed out to her and I said, do you realize how much of this has been happening? her immediate response was, yes, I have, and I've been wondering why. And the reason that that hit me so hard was because in that moment, I was like, stop that. But at the same time, I knew exactly where it came from. It came from me. It is part of a scarcity mindset, and that's one of the ones I mentioned earlier, and I said that we'd get into this a little bit more. But in that moment, I realized, and it was powerful because as I am learning to work on my scarcity mindset, and I have a very strong scarcity mindset, this is probably still one of my biggest stumbling blocks. I was seeing it manifest in her, and I knew exactly where it came from. So where did it come from? It came from the way I grew up. It came from growing up on WIC and food stamps and welfare, and constantly being told that there wasn't enough money for this or wasn't enough money for that, or we couldn't afford something, anything that I wanted. And it came from growing up in an area where there was a very clear division of haves and have-nots. So when school started teaching me about implicit bias, what I learned about myself was that my implicit biases had nothing to do with what they were talking about, which was skin color or cultural or ethnic background. It had to do with haves and have-nots. My brain was still dividing everybody into haves and have-nots. And I learned growing up that people who had were buttholes. They were jerks. Most of them were. Most of them were not very nice, and they picked on me a lot. So, and it also came from religious teachings. It came from religious teachings that said that that led us to believe that having wealth was sinful, was not okay. It was that we needed to sell everything, and you know what I mean? And there's some truth to that, but not the way it's taught a lot of the time. So this is all going down yesterday in the midst of a text conversation, and I'm crying because I'm realizing in that moment that God is working. He's working on this problem of mine, and he's helping me identify it with my daughter. And I said to her, I said, don't do that. I said, don't wait for the other shoe to drop. And that's what it looks like. It looks like questioning everything good that happens because you think something good that happens is automatically going to be balanced or shot down by something bad. And it's about waiting for the other shoe to drop. And thought processes like, I'm not lucky, I wasn't meant to have money, I'm being punished for something. You guys heard me just say that. I don't win things. If I had money, I'd be a butthole. And I passed this on because this is how I operated. And I could see it in that moment. And I was like, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that. Be grateful. Find a good way to steward it. But don't sit there and convince yourself that something bad is coming because of it. So when I say, how do we reset? How do we unlearn? We start by observing how rules, beliefs, or habits of ours make us feel when they come up, and how we react to them and how we handle them. And we ask ourselves if we know why we're doing it, why we believe that way. It's really just about a pause. And we identify whether or not that belief or that rule or whatever it is that we follow, that habit, still makes sense. If it aligns with our current beliefs, or if it's applicable to our current circumstances. A great example of this is where we often, when we get into new relationships, we penalize. Yes, Miss Kayla, I'm glad you said that. You're absolutely right. You're spot on. We often, when we get into new relationships, we penalize those people for what other people have done to us. We automatically expect that that's the way it's going to be, when sometimes that person doesn't even think remotely the same way. So that's what I mean when I say we identify whether or not what we believe is actually applicable to the current circumstances. And then we have to be curious, and we have to be willing to seek new information. It's basically to find evidence, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, to find evidence in favor or opposed to our belief, to see if it still applies. Just like the question about the fishing tournament. Why do we do this? I don't know. And if I don't know, if there's not a good reason, do we need to keep doing it? And then that's where we replace or we redirect it and we start to practice. We replace that erroneous belief or that belief that just doesn't, it doesn't have to be a wrong belief. It just maybe doesn't work anymore. And we replace it with something that does. And then we have to practice. We have to practice. And we have to be patient with ourselves and give ourselves grace, because it takes a long time to undo those old beliefs and those old habits. It takes a very long time. I've been working on the scarcity thing, came to a head for me over a year ago. I'm still working on it, But the coolest thing for me was in that moment yesterday to be able to go, oh my gosh, that's it. There it is. There's that pattern. And I know where it came from. And now maybe she and I can work on it together so that we can break it for the next generation in our family. So that sounds like a lot. That sounds really overwhelming, okay? So let me break it down in a very, very simple challenge for you today. Write down one rule or one belief that you've been living by and ask yourself where it came from and whether or not it still belongs there, whether or not it still serves you in your current circumstances, on your current path. Does it still apply? And then at that point, just identify it right now. At that point, you can decide what steps you may or may not take to address it. Okay, and you can come back to this video. It's going to be on YouTube when I'm done. It's going to be here for 30 days. You can come back and keep listening so that you can go back and grab those that how-to list and go through the process. That's totally up to you. But my challenge to you today, and if you want to put it in the comments, if you want to send me a message for accountability, I welcome you to do that. I really do, because I think that when we speak it to someone else, I think that helps us to go, okay, now I can do something about it, because now I know it's there. You know, that old saying, the first step to admitting you have a problem is, or the first step to fixing a problem is to admit that you have one, right? So my challenge is write down one rule or belief that you've been living by, and ask yourself where it came from and whether or not it still serves you or still belongs in your world and on your path. And then I want you to remember these things as we wrap up this morning. At the core of this, our beliefs and our thoughts are not always true. And I've talked about that before too. And if I can find that video, if I can remember which one it is, I'll drop the link in the comments. Sometimes they are not true. Sometimes they're just not true anymore. They just don't fit anymore. And just because it helped or because it worked at one point to help you survive or help you get through something does not mean it still does. It doesn't make it a concrete fact. And when you do this, when you start examining your rules that you live by, Kayla, you're so funny. My challenge is write down one rule or belief that you've been living by and ask yourself where it came from, whether or not it still belongs there or still serves you. Okay? If you want to share it with me by text, by messenger, drop it, or in the comments, great. If not, just identify it. And then you can come back, like I said, watch this video and see what the next step is. You know, observe, ask, identify, be curious, seek new information, replace it, redirect it, and practice. Remember, when you do this, you're not erasing your past. You're updating your understanding. It's okay to be open and curious, and that's the best way to do it, is to lead with curiosity, which is a phrase I find myself using more and more. So I hope you found this helpful today. Again, it's going to be here for 30 days. You can go back, rewatch. It'll be uploaded to my YouTube channel within like an hour, so you can go back and save it and watch it there, pause, rewind, whatever, because I know that was a lot of information, especially in the how do we deal with these, how do we start this unlearning process. But it's there, and if you have identified something that you want to address, like I said, if you want to share, you're welcome to message me, drop a comment, shoot me a text if you have my phone number, whatever the case may be. So if you found this helpful, of course, as always, share it, because it might help someone else. If you found it helpful, it might help someone else. It'll be on YouTube within an hour. And then if you have other topics you'd like to see me cover, or if there was a specific thing in the list of things we need to unlearn that you would like me to dig more into, shoot me a message, drop a comment, whatever. Y'all know where to find me. I'm easy to find. In any case, until next Wednesday, thank you so much for being here and be well. Bye.